second panel discussion now, which will be moderated by Dr. Anthony Chambordon, the Associate Professor at the Law, Economics and Management Department at Paris Sorbonne University. And Dr. Chambordon will moderate the discussion on water usage in industrial manufacturing. And I will leave it for you, Anthony, to introduce your panelists. Okay? And I would appreciate it if you can help with the time also.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Good morning. So we're going to talk about water usage in industrial manufacturing, policy strategy, and local partnership to enable improved water resource management. To discuss this topic, we have a quite impressive panel with 4 panelists. Dr. Klaus Gonzelmann, please, who's the Vice President, Safety, Health, and Environmental Sustainability, Nestlé Group, Switzerland. We have Dr. Udayan Banerjee from the Policy and Regulation Specialist Tadweer, the Center of Waste Management, United Arab Emirates. Anna Alpern-Lande, who's Senior Manager, New Business Development, Shell International Exploration and Production from, of course, Netherlands. And eventually, the engineer Salem Mubarak Al-Braiki, who's the Director of Policy and Regulations, Divisions Environment Agency, Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. So, well, as all you know, water is required to manufacture products, is a focal point in most industrial activities which produce wastewater must be treated in a way that protects the environment. So I would like leave the floor to the panelists and give first a few minutes their comment about this topic, and then we will launch a couple of questions. So we have 2-3 minutes for each panelist. Please, engineer, could you start by talking about this topic?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thanks, Doctor. Looking into the components of the topic that we are talking about, I would address something that if we want to talk about the usage of the treated water or industrial water within the industrial sectors, there are things that are linked together. So the way that we would see it, that when we look into the strategies and policies, we should not differentiate between them or work closely in each one. So we have to integrate always between the strategies that are related with the environment or policies, with the strategies and policies that are linked with the economy, because they are not, they are linked together. So we should not look at it from the perspective that they are against each other. We should see that they are completing each other. After those policies are in the dress, there is a very important component that we should be looking at, which are the tools of implementing those policies and regulations, which should be actually based on the technologies and researches. This is the second component. The third thing, we should understand that when the policies are implemented, the economic situation of the country and the type of industries that we want to work in, we should know ahead what sort of industry we want to have from the environmental perspective and the economic perspective in the coming 5, 10, 20 years, and we build on it. So, and from that perspective, we look into into 2 ways. What do we have existing? So what are the policies or regulations or policy instruments that could be implemented on it for the existing ones and for the new ones? One of the elements that could be used, which I believe is really important, which we call it regulatory impact assessment. So if there is any policy or regulation or things that we will do it that could have an effect on any type of industry, it has to go through those processes. So we know the effectiveness of this process, of this policy or regulation into the industry, how beneficial it could be, how it could save the money, as we have heard before that Mr. Alan Thompson mentioned that there will be some tariffs and the subsidies will decrease. So the industry should understand that these elements is going to be really a challenge for them in the coming future. So this is in a simple way that I could explain it.
Very well. So on these complementary policies, maybe Anna, you would add something on.
Sure. I'm going to build on what my esteemed colleague on the panel has just said, but in a slightly different way. I mean, I think we all understand the challenge, but it's good to go back to some of the numbers. So, if you think about what has happened according to McKinsey, if you think about what happens in the 20th century, we saw a 4-fold growth in the population, but a 40-fold increase in GDP, right? So if we think about how much we've gotten out of our population increase, it's been huge. And what has really driven that has been, the technology revolution, the availability of labor inputs due to population growth, the ability, increasing globalization, urbanization, the use of unpriced natural capital. So water has been free, more or less, whether you're talking about California, agriculture industry, or you're talking about Abu Dhabi. It doesn't matter. We haven't really charged for water in a substantial way. It's certainly not close to its value. And then, other natural capital, like disposing of water, has been effectively free. And so while we look at, and while we value technology, innovation, the demographic growth, this can continue for a while, it creates a huge amount of pressure on natural resources. And so effectively, by 2030, we're going to have another billion people come out of poverty. There'll be 2.5 more billion people who are middle-class consumers, and this is going to create effectively a demand shock on the resource market. And so if you add to that what's happening with climate change, we have a real potential for that natural capital to no longer be significantly available. So what are the solutions for this? So of course, we can go back to the tried and tested way, which is go look for new supplies, whether it's new supplies of energy, look at the supply side. We can also look at efficiency, and we've done, so far, not a very good job of efficiency, so there's material gains to be had around efficiency. But both of these pathways, will relatively quickly have diminishing returns. And they only delay where we need to go. And so where do we actually need to go? We probably need to move towards a more circular economy. And we need to begin to look at resources as a durable good, and the way that we use them as a temporary change in state. Yeah? And a circular economy approach is likely to be a more sustainable way. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. And so I come back to my colleague's point about regulation, which is that regulators need to work with industry to figure out, what is, for example, if you take water, what is the best use of an industrial water? What is the state of that water? And, instead of looking with a disposal methodology, how can we work together in a fairly collaborative fashion to take the water from one state? Potentially a water could be out of our gas liquids process, we have the potential, we have zero liquids discharge today, we have the potential to basically have distilled chemical water, right? And if there are users who would use that, and make good use of it, that is a potential use. In some of our, gas processing facilities, we get out fairly, again, water that is fairly sterile, fairly clean, and there are some things to be cleaned up, but it's a fairly reusable type of water. And so by working with regulators on a case-by-case basis, and unfortunately is a case-by-case basis, there's no general rules, we can begin to say, how do we take this water into the next reuse? And how do we use these kinds of assets in a circular way? And this will require a significant amount of technology, giving Ms. Mano at a time, a significant amount of technology, and it's my hope that we will begin to see regional technology clusters to start to form out of the needed technologies in order to make this circular economy a reality.
Thank you, Anna. So complementary regulations, circular economy, and what about the water status here, for instance, in UAE, Dr. Udayan? How would you characterize the water status in the region, legally speaking, from a regulator point of view?
See, the arid zone has got two major challenges, if I may say so. It's having the challenge of water security as well as food security. And we should not be looking at these in isolation. Water security, if we really look at relating it with the food, any food grain or vegetables, fruits, if we really look back, how much amount of water is consumed in producing. Let's take the global average figures. To produce a ton of wheat, we need something like 1,600,000 meter cube of water. Now, if you waste that food, you have actually wasted that food and you have wasted that amount of water as well. So, coming back to the policy and regulation aspect of water conservation, industries have a corporate social responsibility to really emphasize and work towards sustainable consumption. I'll take the example of soft drink industries, the beverage industries. Internationally, there are figures, the best technology available would consume something like 1.3 to 1.5 liters of water per liter of beverage produced. But there are soft drink industries in the region which are actually consuming something like 6 to 7 liters of water per liter of beverage. Now, what is this? So, the regulatory framework, the policy and the strategy should be such designed that really forces or actually sets the framework for moving towards sustainable consumption. That's one aspect. The other thing is, when we look at, in this region, we have a real major challenge with clean water. And desalinated water being used indiscriminately for purposes which easily can be substituted by treated wastewater. And that's not happening. Now, the regulatory framework should really work towards emphasizing the designated best use of the water types. If you can really substitute treated wastewater, fresh water by treated wastewater, one should work towards it. You will see car wash stations regularly using desalinated water. Why is it so? Construction industry, a lot of such use is there where you will see fresh water being consumed. And we continuously keep on drawing marine water, produce desalinated water, and discharge the saline or the brine component into the marine. So we are also damaging our marine resources. So the policy and regulatory framework should really focus on the major components. See, this challenge has to be met not only by the policy and regulations part should be complemented by the technology component. The technology component is already existing. In Europe, in America, in Australia, in the developed world, the technology is there. The technology needs to be brought in and has to be used. Here in this region, it's easily available and is being taken for granted because primarily there's a lack of driver, the regulatory driver. We had introduced monitoring environmental indicators way back in 2008, 2009, and it was then taken off. If the industries, the commercial sector are not forced to monitor water usage, water recycling, if it is not being monitored, we will never be able to benchmark it, and we will never be able to achieve any targets set out.
Thank you very much. Klaus, you wanted to react on that last point regarding the use of water, and you have to say something about what Nestle did.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Julian, thank you very much. I mean, you made two important points which are very relevant to what I had intended to say and which I would like to build on. The first one was that water and food security connection, which obviously Nestle being the largest food company in the world is very, very relevant. And knowing that agriculture represents 70% of the freshwater use, we're selling 1.2 billion consumer units every single day. We are most likely the biggest, or at least one of the biggest, indirect water users. So water, food security, absolutely key, and that is for us also the reason why we participate in meetings like this one. The second part as well, where you mentioned that in particular soft drink, there are different standards of efficiency and that you can really improve much more. You mentioned 1.7 up to several liters. That water is only the direct manufacturing footprint. And now if you add to that for soft drinks also the manufacturer, the growing of the sugar that goes into the soft drinks, we're actually ending up anything between 100 and 300 liters per liter of soft drink. That is why, and Nestle also, I make a disclaimer here, Nestle also happens to be the world's largest manufacturer of bottled water, so we obviously have a vested interest in the debate soft drink versus water there. But clearly drinking water is the most water efficient way to hydrate yourself, and it's actually also healthier because with the whole obesity debate and so on, we see a marked shift of the market from soft drinks towards bottled water. Now we also manufacture some soft drinks within Nestle. I mean, we're exposed in both areas, but certainly we believe that that bottled water is the healthier and the much more water efficient beverage there. But let me talk about what we're doing specifically in Nestle. We have made 5 commitments already a number of years ago alongside the water debate, which we structured along the 5 initials WATER. I'll take all 5 of them. The first one, W, is water efficiency and sustainability across our operations, across our 500 factories. There we have committed that by the end of this year, over a 10-year period, we will reduce our water consumption, water withdrawal by 40%. Currently, at the end of last year, we are at minus 36%. We're confident that we will hit that target at the end of this year. Also, we have committed to make some water stewardship initiatives within a given watershed and focus that on 5 high priority areas, places like Pakistan, India, Mexico, and so on. The second one, the A, is advocate for effective water policies and stewardship. And I think there it's very important also that we very strongly advocate the human right to water. Even so, we have obviously a commercial interest for water, and we want that water has a more appropriate price, as Anna already referred to. We also very strongly advocate that the human needs for hydration, for basic hygiene, has to be guaranteed for everyone. And in our own operations, again, in the local communities where we operate, we have signed up to the WASH pledge, the Water for Sanitation and Hygiene pledge by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, of which we have been a founding member more than 20 years ago. And that is basically to guarantee access to sufficient clean water of appropriate standard to all of our employees worldwide, and also to the local communities in which we operate, which is something we're implementing at the moment. The third one is the T. It's treating the water we discharge effectively. And in many parts of the world where we operate some of our 500 factories, there are no public water treatment facilities available. So we have been pioneering our own water treatment facilities. It actually started in our home country in Switzerland as recently as 1929, when Nestle was even in Switzerland, long before regulations, even Switzerland had regulations on water quality, where we built the first industrial wastewater treatment plant. And in many other countries of the world, as globalization sort of went on and we started operations in other parts of the world, we were often significantly ahead of regulations and obviously of other companies to build wastewater treatment plant. Very often I'm asked why we're doing that, because obviously that adds cost that competitors of us wouldn't have in those parts of the world, but we see that as an expression of our long-term commitment, and in the long run it even helps you to be more competitive, because what we've seen very often is whenever we open a wastewater treatment plant, very often the first one in a region, we would obviously have local dignitaries cutting the ribbon and opening it, and these people would typically come back within a few months with some of our competitors and say, well, if Nestle can do that, we expect that from you as well. And we see that over time, the regulations then get tighter and tighter, and our competitors are forced to put the same investments in. Us having done those investments earlier, even so it was a higher initial cost, on the long term has a payback and therefore a business sense. The E in water for us stands for engaging, in particular with suppliers, and there, in particular, again, with those in agriculture. We work with about 700,000 farmers directly, where we buy agricultural materials directly from them, and there we help them for more integrated water management. Recent project is climate intelligent coffee in Colombia, or significant changes to irrigation methods for coffee growing in Vietnam. Vietnam is one of those countries that uses a lot of irrigation water for coffee growing there. That was very, very wasteful and still is, but we have been demonstrating that you can save up to 90% of that irrigation water and actually even increase the yield in those parts of the world. Let's basically take it up. Probably already have talked too long about it. We can come back.
In terms of local partnerships, you mentioned just before starting that you have developed quite an innovative initiative regarding local partnerships in South America.
Right. Well, yeah. There are two aspects to it. The one is the particular one in Mexico. That's in our own operations, where we where we have the most efficient water factory, it does, or food factory that does actually not use any more water, because there we are using milk, fresh milk as a raw material, and fresh milk has about 80% water content. What we're doing there is we make milk powder, so we end up with all that water, rather than just discharging that as wastewater or treated wastewater. We treat it to a level where we can reuse it and keep it within the context and actually have a positive water balance there to the local environment. And in terms of working with the farmers, again, there we realized that we needed to go beyond our own four walls of our factories and engage, because it's no good if we're not using water in our own factories anymore, in extreme cases like the one in Mexico and to be replicated in other parts of the world. But we also have to help our suppliers, including small, medium-sized enterprises that supply some non-agricultural raw materials to us, and that often don't have neither the technology nor the expertise. For example, in the Philippines, we had for more than 20 years a program called Greening the Supply Chain, where we helped them with the introduction of very simple environmental management systems, and then helping them to construct very simple water treatment facilities that had a huge impact there on the local communities.
Thank you, Anna. So we can do it with milk, but we'll do it as well with oil, right? We can do it with milk. You can do it as well with oil, right? What's the last innovation in Shell regarding the waste of water in the oil production?
Well, oil operations suffer from the curse and the benefit that they're very large scale, and they're also very heterogeneous. So, I had a conversation the other day with Intel, and, Intel builds a fabrication factory, and they build one in California, they build one in Malaysia, they build one in China. Every one of them is the same, and every one of them has the same quality of wastewater. Oil fields, on the other hand, every one of them, they're spread around the world, and every one of them is different, and every one of them has a different quality of produced water. But I would also just add, oil operations don't just have water from the oil fields. So oil operations are both big users and big producers of water. So if you think about an oil field, like a bottle here, if you're getting water out, if you have a straw going in, and this is under the ground, and you have a straw going out, well, the straw going in, and that straw is pulling water out, or pulling oil out, in order to maintain the pressure in the bottle, you're going to put something back in. And that something could be gas, it could be CO2, or it could be water. And so often, people inject water in order to maintain the pressure in the reservoir. As a consequence, that means that over time, you increase your water fraction, because as the amount of oil goes down, the amount of water goes up. So if you look at, for example, Petroleum Development Oman, in which we're privileged to be a joint venture partner with the Omani government and Total and others, the fraction of water to oil is now 1 part oil to 10 parts water. So for every barrel of oil that we pull out of the ground, 10 parts of water is pulled out, and that water needs to be dealt with and used. And in every instance, we have multiple fields in Oman, and in every instance, what comes out of the field is different. So in one field in the south, the water is closer to 3,000 TDS, and it's fairly clean water. And in another field in the north, not only, is it extremely saline, which is a bit like Oman's the Emirates situation, but it also has heavy metals, it has natural occurring radioactive particles. It's a very challenging water to deal with. And so, for each situation, you have to come up with a bespoke solution. I would just also add that, and we do, but I would also add that that's not the only types of water. So the oil industry has gas processing facilities, places where we take gas and turn it into liquid hydrocarbon products. Those also create water. We also have large camps, which are like small cities, in the desert potentially, could be up to 5,000 or 10,000 people. Those will both use water and produce wastewater. And not all of those water streams are bad, they can actually be reused and used to create a more sustainable environment in a circular methodology.
Thank you, Anna. Any questions from the audience? I don't have anything on the tablet here, but if you want to react on, want to say something regarding what has been said. Yes, please, ma'am.
Hi. I'm from the US, where the relationship between industry and regulators is not very good. So I agree with Engineer Albrecht and Ms. Alpern's Land comments on the importance of collaboration. The question is more for Nestle and Shell. Have any of you operated in a country where they have mandatory water audits and then enforceable limits on water usage included in a permit, and then, you know, some sort of benefit for using innovative technology?
Well, I can answer that very briefly. Our strategy is towards water, getting towards water excellence. And you don't get to excellence by just complying with minimum regulatory standards. So for us, we go far beyond regulatory standards. They do exist in some parts of the world, but we've got mandatory internal company policy, mandatory water audits throughout all of our operations for many years that are far more stringent than any regulations we would have seen.
Anna?
And I would say that it's not so simple as us deciding we're going to do something and not do something. We often operate in partnership with others. So, for example, Shell is a partner in the Emirates, and we are not the operator here. The National Oil Company of Abu Dhabi operates, we don't. So we don't always have control over, we have a voice, but we don't have control. But I can say that in certain cases where we do have control, for example, in Canada, you know, because we could see that it was a water scarce area, because the community really needed the most clean source of water, which came from a local river, we actually answered the request for proposal from the local municipal water authority and worked with contractors to build a wastewater treatment plant, which we then get the offtake from. And we take that water from the wastewater facility and we inject that water into our oil operations.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this very nice chat. I would just like to take the advantage of being moderator to announce a workshop we're going to organize with Paris-Sorbonne University tomorrow afternoon, Thursday from 2 to 5. The topic is water governance, and so we're going to explore in details for 3 hours some of the topics we've been discussed so far regarding the legal framework, regarding the efficiency of a legal framework to develop sustainable water. Thank you very much again.